They said there were men who could silence a crowd with a single sentence, men whose words were sharper than swords, men who stood alone in chambers full of enemies and did not waver. This was Cicero, the orator of Rome, praised by citizens, feared by conspirators, and remembered long after marble temples had fallen to ruin. For centuries people told of his voice, how he exposed traitors in the Senate, how he thundered against corruption and tyranny, and how in the end his words made him too dangerous to be left alive. Some believed he was Rome's last defender, others thought him reckless, too proud, too loud. But no one doubted the power of his speeches that outlived empires. What we know for certain is that Cicero became a symbol, not of armies or battles, but of the strength of a single voice, a reminder that words once spoken can echo for thousands of years. Before we begin, if you truly enjoy these stories, hitting like and subscribe helps me keep making them, and hopefully helps you keep drifting off. Let me know when and where you're listening from tonight. I'm always amazed by the places people tune in. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath in, and then let it out, because once this story begins, chances are you'll be asleep before it ends. The hills of Arpinum glow with morning mist. Stone walls rise from the valley floor, their rough edges softened by vines. The Liris River winds below, carrying a silver ribbon through the countryside. You stand in the courtyard of a villa watching the household stir. Slaves sweep dust from the stones, clatter pots in the kitchen, draw water from cisterns. Bread bakes in clay ovens, its aroma mixing with the sharp bite of olives pressed the day before. Inside, a boy sits with his tablet. His name is Marcus Tullius Cicero. The wax is scratched with Latin letters, smoothed again, scratched again. A tutor hovers nearby, correcting each stumble of the stylus. The boy is bright-eyed, restless. His family belongs to the equestrian order, wealthy enough to own land, yet without the senatorial pedigree of Rome's ruling elite. They are provincials, ambitious provincials. In the shrine beside the atrium, incense curls upward toward painted gods. His mother whispers prayers for her son's fortune. His father dreams of something larger, a path that carries their name to the Senate steps. Cicero traces words again, this time in Greek. His tongue works through foreign syllables, the sound both awkward and musical. The tutor nods, pleased. For in Rome, Latin commands, but Greek inspires. Outside, shepherds guide flocks across the hills. Merchants pass on dusty roads, carts groaning with goods bound for Rome. Soldiers too march by, their shields glinting, their voices rising in songs of conquest. Even in this provincial valley, the pulse of the Republic is felt. At 12, Cicero already imitates the gestures of orators. He stands in the peristyle garden, voice bouncing between marble columns. His hands slice the air, his eyes rise toward imaginary crowds. His tutor reminds him, words must not only be correct, they must be alive. At night, lamplight flickers across scrolls. Cicero copies passages of philosophy, Plato and Aristotle reshaped into Latin notes. He whispers arguments to himself, testing ideas in the quiet. Justice, duty, friendship, honour, they become companions in the dark. In the atrium, older men debate land and taxes. The boy listens from the edge, silent yet attentive. Each pause, each flourish, each barb. He memorizes them like a craftsman memorizes tools. For words he senses can wound as deeply as blades. Beyond the villa, the Republic groans. In 91 BCE, Rome's Italian allies demand citizenship. War follows, the social war, turning neighbour against neighbour. The young Cicero watches soldiers depart, sees wounded men return, and hears the grief of families in the streets. He himself marches briefly with Pompeius Strabo, father of Pompey the Great. The camp reeks of leather, smoke, and blood. Cicero does not forget the screams of battle, nor the sight of bodies in ditches. He learns that power comes not only from the sword, but from the words that command men to wield it. Back in Arpinum, the rhythms of learning continue. Rhetoric, law, philosophy. His days are filled with recitations and practice speeches. The boy grows lean and pale, more scholar than soldier, and yet his ambition glows hotter than any soldier's fire. You watch him walk the garden paths, scroll in hand. He mutters passages aloud, debating with unseen rivals. His father observes with pride, knowing his son's mind may carry their family farther than arms ever could. The word novus homo, new man, lingers in the air like both promise and warning. For Cicero dreams of Rome. He dreams of standing in the forum, his voice rolling over marble crowds. He dreams of laws that protect the weak, of speeches that bend the will of the mighty. Even as a boy, he believes words can shape the world. The sun dips low over the valley. Smoke drifts upward from hearths, the sound of lyres soft in the distance. You linger at the edge of the villa, watching the boy close his tablet, rise and stretch his arms toward the fading light. His journey has only begun. Soon he will leave Arpinum for Rome. Soon his voice will echo far beyond this provincial valley. The Republic is waiting, though it does not yet know his name. You walk beside the road that leads from Arpinum to Rome, dust lifting around sandals and cartwheels. The hills fall away and the breath of the city reaches you like heat off stone. Somewhere ahead, a young man carries more books than clothes and more hopes than provisions. Rome opens like a crowded amphora. Voices spill from every alley. Incense smokes from shrines, mingling with the tang of metal and sweat. At the forum, words crash like waves against marble steps. Cicero stops there longer than anywhere else, listening as if to music only he can hear. He lodges modestly, but he spends lavishly on time. Hours in libraries, hours in porticos where teachers hold forth. He copies passages until his wrist aches and the wax tablet grows thin at the edges. You watch him shadow older advocates through the basilicas. He notes how each enters a crowd like a ship cutting water, how a pause can hold 100 men, how a raised eyebrow can do what 3 paragraphs cannot. At dawn, he practices voice. He climbs the Catiline steps and recites to stone. He throws lines at the wind to test their weight. He reads poetry not to dream, but to engineer cadence. His teachers push him toward Greece. If Rome is the stage, Athens is the rehearsal hall. So he goes, crossing the bright water with a satchel of scrolls and a hunger that does not sleep. You stand at the rail as gulls trace white arcs above the sea. Athens receives him with columns and questions. In the shade of the academy, he listens to disputations that turn like constellations. Plato's dialogues become instruments. Aristotle's clarity, the chisel for thought. He learns that a definition can be sharper than a dagger. He studies with Stoics who teach endurance like a craft, with Peripatetics who map the mind like a city, with skeptics who sand doubt into a tool rather than a whole. Each school gives him a lens. Each lens reveals a different Rome to bring home. At night he writes letters back to friends. He describes the Athenians' way of weighing words on scales you cannot see. He confesses he has learned to love silence before speech. He admits that rhythm can persuade where argument fails. From Athens he sails to Rhodes, where oratory is taught like anatomy. You enter the hall with him, white light pooling on stone. Apollonius Molon stands at the front, measuring breath as if measuring gold. He trims Cicero's excess the way a gardener trims vine. Less thunder at the start, Molon warns. Let the storm build where the listener thinks it is clear. He trains the hand as much as the tongue, when to lift it, when to still it, when to let it rest like a promise unspoken. Cicero's voice deepens and steadies. The quicksilver rush becomes a river with banks. He learns to place a word like a stone that redirects the current. He learns to hide effort until effort looks like grace. On the quay at Rhodes, he reads his own draft aloud. Sea wind steals thin lines but leaves the strong. You watch him cut entire passages without mercy. He smiles when the argument breathes after surgery. When he returns to Rome, he brings Greece in his luggage and Rhodes in his lungs. He rents a room near the Forum and a desk he barely uses because he is never sitting. He chases cases too small for others to notice. Debts, disputes, a quarrel over a boundary wall, each is a whetstone. He befriends scribes. He tips doorkeepers. He learns which basilica holds sound and which swallows it. He studies which judges carry pride like armour and which carry doubt like tinder. You see him in the Basilica Porcia, eyes closed a moment before speaking. He lets the room come to him. Then he launches not into thunder but into clarity. Jokes land lightly as scouts before the main force of reason. By the time the argument arrives, the benches lean forward. He loses sometimes. He notes why in a notebook smudged with ash and olive oil. Too much metaphor here, too little law there. Voice too fast at the hinge point. He vows not to make the same mistake twice. In the afternoons he returns to philosophy as if to a spring. You walk with him beneath porticos where shade tastes cool. He drafts the skeleton of ideas he will later flesh in prose. What is duty? What is the state for? What does a good man owe a bad city? At dinners he listens more than he speaks. He counts who flatters whom. He measures laughter against power like a surveyor measures land. He learns that a pause at the right insult is safer than a retort. He learns that memory is the second tongue of politics. Once, he visits a friend's country estate and practices in an orchard. Wind moves through leaves like a soft audience. He tries lines about justice and hears birds interrupt him without apology. He laughs and starts again, editing with the patience of a farmer pulling stones from soil. Rome's winter rains come. Streets turn to slick ribbons. Cicero stands beneath a lintel, waiting for the downpour to soften, and recites case law under his breath. When the rain eases, he steps out into steam and argument. He builds a small circle. Clients who trust him because he explains before he dazzles. Friends who argue with him because he does not punish disagreement. Mentors who fear him a little because they hear their own tricks improved in his mouth. You watch him return one evening to his lodging, cloak heavy with rain. He warms his hands over a brazier and reads Greek by firelight. The city outside roars with taverns and politics, but he keeps counsel with dead masters who do not shout. Sometimes he dreams of Arpinum, the smell of bread, the sound of his tutor tapping the tablet with a stylus. He wakes with the answer to a problem he did not solve the night before. He notes it down before the dream fades. Word begins to move through Rome in the most reliable way words move. Quietly, from clerk to clerk, from doorkeeper to patron. There is a young advocate who speaks like a Greek but thinks like a Roman. There is a new man who makes old men listen. You can feel the tilt of fortune even in the hum of the Forum. Shopkeepers glance up when his name is mentioned. Magistrates pretend not to, but they listen too. The city is a great ear, and it has turned toward him. A case approaches that is larger than his room, his purse, or his sleep. The charge is parricide. The defendant is Sextus Roscius. Behind the accusation stand men who stand behind a dictator. The air of Rome tastes of iron when this news arrives. Cicero closes his door and sits with the facts until midnight. He speaks them aloud in order, then out of order, then backward, until they yield their shape. He knows that truth alone will not walk into court on its own legs. It must be dressed and guided without lying. It must be fearless without being foolish. You walk with him to the Basilica the next morning. The crowd is thicker than any he has seen. Faces tilt like shields toward the doorway. Whispers pass like coins from hand to hand. A young advocate tightens his grip on a rolled speech and breathes once, twice, exactly as Molon taught him. The city holds still. The case of Sextus Roscius begins, and the quiet boy from Arpinum steps into a room that could end him or make him. The basilica hums with tension. Columns rise high into shadow, catching sunlight only at their tops. Lawyers shuffle scrolls, clients whisper prayers, and the crowd presses close. Everyone knows today's trial is no ordinary dispute. At the front stands Sextus Roscius, accused of killing his own father. A charge of parricide, the darkest stain a Roman could bear. The punishment, if guilty, would be savage, sewn into a sack with snakes and thrown into the Tiber. But whispers say the accusation is false. The elder Roscius' property, seized after his murder, has already passed into the hands of Sulla's allies. To question the case is to question the dictator's circle. Most advocates shy away. None wish to risk their lives. And then steps forward Marcus Tullius Cicero. Still young, thin from long nights of study. His toga hangs loose, not yet bearing the authority of office, but his eyes are clear and his voice has begun to carry. You stand at the edge of the basilica, close enough to see his hands tremble for just a moment. He clears his throat. The murmurs fall into silence. When he speaks, the words flow sharp and steady. He defends Roscius with reason. He turns evidence inside out, showing inconsistencies, contradictions. He describes how the accusers stood to gain wealth, how their story bends under scrutiny. But he does so carefully. He does not name Sulla. He aims his arrows at shadows just short of the dictator himself. The crowd shifts, caught between awe and fear. To hear a novus homo stand against corruption is thrilling, but to hear him circle so close to Sulla's men is dangerous. Every breath in the chamber feels borrowed. Cicero raises his hand, palm outward. His voice deepens as he speaks of justice. He declares that no Roman should suffer false charges to feed the greed of the powerful. The words fall like stones in water, sending ripples through the room. For hours, he argues, logic chained to rhythm, outrage cooled with wit. He commands attention without shouting, weaving reason with passion. Even seasoned advocates lean forward, measuring his cadence. At last he concludes, not with thunder, but with clarity. If Rome allows this injustice, he warns, then no family is safe, no law sacred. The silence after his words is heavy, almost unbearable. The verdict is delivered. Sextus Roscius is acquitted. Gasps scatter through the basilica, followed by a swell of relief. Roscius weeps, clutching Cicero's hand. But you see Cicero's eyes flicker past the joy. He knows what he has done. He has challenged men who can kill without consequence. And yet, he has also proven his power. Words have struck harder than swords. Outside, the forum buzzes. Citizens gather in clusters, repeating fragments of his speech. They speak his name with awe, some with caution. A new voice has risen in Rome. That night, Cicero returns home pale and exhausted. The strain of defying powerful enemies weighs heavy, but his eyes burn with something fierce, something unshakable. He has tasted the power of oratory not only to argue, but to protect. In the quiet, he writes notes by lamplight. He sketches arguments that could have gone smoother. He studies his own delivery like a soldier studying wounds after battle. Each line, each pause, a weapon to sharpen for the next fight. You can sense it. This trial was not an ending, but a beginning. The Republic has found a new defender, though it does not yet know how much it will demand of him. The forum awakens with new energy. Merchants spread their wares, hawking olives, wool, and bronze tools. But beneath the normal clamour runs a steady undercurrent. One name spoken again and again: Cicero. You drift among the crowds as citizens retell the scene from yesterday's trial. One man swears Cicero's voice shook the Basilica like thunder. Another insists he saw Sulla's allies flinch when Cicero drew close to naming them. A third says he has never heard logic flow so sharp, so dangerous. By midday, even children repeat fragments of his speech as if they were lines from a play. They mimic his gestures, lifting hands to the sky, pressing palms forward. The crowd laughs, but admiration rings beneath the humour. A new voice has entered Rome, and it cannot be silenced. In the basilicas, scribes copy his words onto tablets. Passages of the defence spread through the courts like wildfire. Each retelling shifts slightly, but the core remains. Cicero had the courage to speak, not rashly, not recklessly, but with precision that cut deep. At dinner parties that evening, senators murmur his name. Some marvel at his daring. Others warn that a young man who challenges Sulla's circle may not live long. Yet all agree on one point: he cannot be ignored. You watch him walk through the forum 2 days later, his toga plain, his steps steady. Yet heads turn as he passes. Doorkeepers nudge each other. Clerks lean closer to whisper. Even magistrates glance from their benches. Cicero himself seems unchanged. He still carries scrolls tucked awkwardly under one arm. He still speaks with the quick rhythm of a student rehearsing. But behind the modesty burns a quiet confidence. He knows Rome is listening. Soon, minor cases find their way to his desk. Disputes over inheritances, contracts, debts. He treats each with the same care as a trial of life and death. Clients marvel that a man so young labours so fiercely over their troubles. His courtroom style refines with every appearance. He learns when to open with wit, when to open with solemnity. He experiments with pacing, letting silence weigh as heavily as words. Even in defeat, he studies the outcome like a craftsman studying a flawed piece of marble. And still the whispers grow. Clerks speak of a new man who sounds like the Greeks but thinks like a Roman. Senators call him clever if reckless. Ordinary citizens begin to call him defender. The Republic is always hungry for heroes, and here perhaps is one. At home, his nights are long. You watch lamplight flicker against his face as he copies passages from Greek philosophy. He writes and rewrites arguments until ink stains his hands. His wife worries at his pale cheeks, his thinning frame. But Cicero cannot stop. When friends question his drive, he answers with calm resolve. Rome, he says, needs a voice not tied to armies or ancient names. Rome needs words sharper than swords, and if he is to be that voice, he must never let it grow dull. The Forum rewards his diligence. Crowds now gather not only for verdicts, but to hear his openings, his flourishes, his carefully measured wit. Young advocates study him as he once studied others. Scribes rush to preserve his phrasing. Rome is beginning to memorize Cicero. Still, shadows linger. You notice the cautious eyes of men connected to Sulla. They do not laugh at Cicero's jokes. They do not praise his courage. They mark him quietly as a man to be watched. Yet Cicero does not flinch. He carries on with the steady force of a river-cutting stone. Each case adds weight to his reputation. Each word draws him closer to the highest courts, the highest offices. By the end of the year, his name has travelled farther than he could have imagined. From the taverns of the Subura to the marble steps of the Senate, from rural villas to foreign envoys' ears, Rome has discovered its new orator. And you can feel it. The city itself seems to lean toward him, as if preparing for the next storm, the next fight, the next speech that will set its heart racing. Cicero is no longer merely a student or a provincial lawyer. He is a voice Rome will hear again and again and again. The trial of Sextus Roscius had been his gamble. The aftermath is his reward. His rise has begun. By 70 BCE, Cicero's name carries weight far beyond the minor courts. Whispers of his daring defence in the Roscius case have grown into recognition across the Forum, and now he faces his greatest challenge yet, the prosecution of Gaius Verus, former governor of Sicily. The Basilica is packed long before the proceedings begin. Merchants abandon their stalls, senators crowd into rows, scribes hover with sharpened styluses. This is no ordinary trial. Verus stands accused of looting temples, extorting farmers, and bleeding Sicily dry. The scale of his corruption shocks even those used to Rome's excess. You find a place near the colonnade, pressed between citizens craning for a glimpse. Verres himself sits with forced calm, his robes immaculate, his face stiff with arrogance. Beside him, his advocates shuffle scrolls and mutter strategy. They have every reason to feel secure. Verres is wealthy, well-connected, and notorious for buying verdicts. But today he faces Marcus Tullius Cicero, the novus homo, the new man from Arpinum, who has sworn to expose every theft, every cruelty. For weeks, Cicero has travelled Sicily gathering testimony. Farmers, sailors, priests and townsmen all spoke of plunder and humiliation. Their words now wait to be unleashed in the heart of Rome. When Cicero enters the chamber, a hush spreads like cloth pulled taut. He wears no ornaments, no flashy jewellery. His toga hangs in plain folds, but the energy around him crackles. He pauses, lets the silence ripen, and then begins. His voice is measured, not rushed. He paints the picture slowly, stone by stone, of a governor who treated Sicily not as a province but as personal treasure. He describes fields stripped bare, farmers bankrupted, families broken. He names sacred temples pillaged, their gold and statues carted off to Verus's villa. Gasps ripple through the audience. Many had heard rumours of corruption, but here details accumulate like thunderclouds. Cicero reads sworn statements, cites witnesses, produces letters that Verres thought buried. Each piece fits another stone into a crushing wall. At one point, Cicero raises a carved tablet for all to see. It lists grain shipments owed to Rome, shipments that never arrived. The missing grain, Cicero explains, had been sold by Verres for profit while Sicilian children starved. The crowd erupts in outrage. voices rising like surf against rocks, Vera's advocates protest, claiming bias, exaggeration, fabrication. But Cicero meets them with calm precision. He does not thunder, he dismantles. Each objection he answers with records, with dates, with testimony so detailed it cannot be dismissed. You notice the faces of the jurors, some pale, others flush with anger. Even those loyal to Verres shift uneasily in their seats. Cicero has left them little room for escape. To acquit would be to brand themselves corrupt before all of Rome. Hour by hour the prosecution builds. Cicero mocks Verres's greed with biting wit, comparing him to a pirate who preferred temples to ships. He twists irony into a knife, declaring that Verres had achieved what no barbarian could, the conquest of Sicily without war. Laughter erupts bitter and sharp. Outside, the trial dominates every tavern, every portico. Fishermen tell each other that Sicily may finally see justice. Merchants say Cicero is the only man in Rome willing to stand against such power. The forum has become an echo chamber for his words. Verres himself grows paler with each session. His lips press thin. His eyes dart toward his advocates as if they might conjure salvation. But they too look beaten, their strategies shattered against Cicero's relentless clarity. And then comes the moment no one expects. Before the trial can even conclude, Verres flees into exile. He does not wait for the final verdict. He knows it would be condemnation. The once arrogant governor has been undone by the voice of a new man. The crowd roars with astonishment. It is a victory not only for Cicero, but for every citizen weary of corruption. He has shown that even the wealthiest, most untouchable men can be brought low by the force of words and evidence. As you leave the Basilica, the sound of Cicero's name rises from every corner. Some speak it in admiration, others in fear, but all speak it. The young advocate from Arpinum has become Rome's defender, and though the trial has ended, you can feel it. Cicero's rise is only beginning. The Republic has found a voice too sharp to be ignored. The dust of the Vera trial has barely settled, yet its echo rolls across the Republic. From the marble steps of the Senate to the crowded taverns of the Subura, one truth is clear. Cicero has struck a blow not just at a man, but at the culture of corruption itself. In Sicily, farmers gather in marketplaces to celebrate. They recall the years when Vera's collectors stripped their grain stores, when soldiers seized oxen, when sacred treasures vanished from temples. Now they speak of Cicero as though he were their advocate not only in court, but in life. Some call him the shield of Sicily, others call him the voice of the voiceless. Back in Rome, you hear senators debating his victory in shaded porticos. Some praise his brilliance, marvelling at the precision with which he dismantled Verres's defence. Others mutter that Cicero has made dangerous enemies, but none deny the outcome. Verres fled before the verdict. The evidence was too overwhelming, the rhetoric too fierce. In the forum, crowds still retell their favourite moments from the speeches. One recalls how Cicero compared Verres to a pirate who pillaged temples instead of ships. Another quotes the line about Verres doing what no barbarian could, conquering Sicily without war. Laughter and outrage mix as the people repeat the words like proverbs. You walk past a group of young advocates practicing in the Basilica. They imitate Cicero's gestures, his pauses, his way of letting silence fall heavy before the next strike. He has become their model, the new measure of oratory. Even seasoned lawyers watch him now with narrowed eyes, gauging how much the ground has shifted beneath them. For Cicero, the trial is more than a victory, it is proof proof that a man without noble ancestry, a novus homo from Arpinum, can stand against the entrenched elite and win. Proof that words, not swords, can break the shield of privilege. At night in the quiet of his home, Cicero writes by lamplight. His hand moves quickly, recording not only the details of the case but also reflections on justice itself. He believes Rome must hold its governors accountable, or the Republic will rot from within. The Verus trial becomes for him a symbol of what Rome is and of what it might still be. You observe him walking the Forum days later. Citizens step aside, offering greetings. A baker calls out thanks from his stall. A senator lifts a hand in cautious acknowledgement. Even children whisper his name as he passes. It is a new kind of power, one built not on lineage, but on the trust of the people. Of course, enemies lurk in the shadows. The wealthy who once counted Verus as an ally do not forgive lightly. They see in Cicero not only a prosecutor, but a threat, a man who might turn his tongue against them one day. Already plots and whispers gather. But for the moment, admiration outshines malice. The Senate itself acknowledges him. Though some sneer at his provincial origins, many cannot deny that he has defended the Republic's dignity. For Cicero has shown that even governors must answer for their crimes. That message ripples outward, beyond Rome's walls, to every province watching how the capital treats its rulers. Scribes copy his speeches and circulate them like treasures. Students read them aloud in schools, testing the rhythm of his phrasing. Citizens memorize passages as if they were lines from an epic poem. Cicero's words, once confined to a courtroom, now belong to Rome itself. In taverns, togas stained with wine, patrons raise cups to his name. Cicero, they say, speaks not just for clients but for us all. Even the poor, who rarely believe the law favours them, sense something different, that this man, thin and pale, might actually care about justice. At his villa outside the city, Cicero allows himself one quiet moment. He walks the garden paths, listening to the rustle of leaves. He knows he has climbed a great step, but he also knows how treacherous the climb will be from here. Enemies wait. Politics devours even the most cautious men. And yet, he feels steady. The Verus case has given him more than fame. It has given him proof that he can stand alone against giants. He's no longer merely a promising advocate. He is now a champion of the people, a defender of the provinces, a name Rome will not forget. As you leave him to his thoughts, the city hums behind you. The Republic is shifting. A young orator has shown that corruption can be challenged, that truth can roar louder than wealth. And though storms lie ahead, the voice of Cicero has already become part of Rome's heartbeat. By 63 BCE, Cicero's rise has carried him to heights few thought possible. From a provincial novus homo, he has climbed step by step through the cursus honorum, quaestor, aedile, praetor, until now he stands at the summit of ordinary magistracies, consul of Rome. The Forum glitters in the autumn light as he takes his seat in the curule chair. The ivory seat creaks slightly under his weight, its curved legs gleaming. Around him, senators fill the chamber, purple-bordered togas brushing the marble floor. You can feel the tension. It is not simply ceremony. It is the question of whether this man, born outside the nobility, truly belongs here. Cicero does not miss the glances. Some are approving, nods of respect for his eloquence and hard-earned assent. Others are sceptical, even hostile, as though his presence insults centuries of patrician privilege. But he sits tall, eyes bright, hands folded on the armrests. Every gesture says, "I am consul, and I will not shrink." In the weeks that follow, you watch him preside over debates with measured authority. He listens closely, never rushing to speak. When he does intervene, his words are clear and deliberate, cutting through the babble of voices like a plough through soil. The Senate begins to recognize that eloquence and prudence can sit together in one man. Yet outside the Senate, danger brews. Lucius Sergius Catilina, Catiline, walks the streets with restless energy. A patrician fallen into debt, he gathers around him desperate men, veterans, and those hungry for change at any cost. His promises are wild: cancellation of debts, redistribution of wealth, a new order born of fire. Whispers float into the Senate chamber. Plots of arson, talk of assassinations, letters exchanged in shadowed corners. The Republic trembles at the edge of collapse, and at its centre as consul stands Cicero. You watch him pace in his home late at night, scrolls scattered on the table. His brow furrows as he weighs every word, every choice. To confront Catiline directly is to risk his life, but to ignore him is to risk the Republic. On a chill morning, the Senate gathers in the Temple of Jupiter Stator. Catiline himself attends, defiant, eyes sharp with fury. The chamber swells with unease. Senators shift in their seats, unsure whether to fear the man before them or the forces behind him. Cicero rises. His toga falls in heavy folds, his voice firm. He fixes his gaze on Catiline and unleashes words that will echo through history. Quo usque tandem abutere, Catilina, patientia nostra. How long, Catiline, will you abuse our patience? The chamber freezes. His words pour forth like molten iron, naming the conspiracy, exposing meetings, weapons, plans. He does not whisper. He does not flinch. Every sentence is a strike against the arrogance seated before him. Catiline glares, jaw clenched. Some senators stare at him in horror, others turn away, but Cicero drives on, his voice rising, his arm outstretched like a sword. He declares that Rome will not fall while he holds office, that the Republic still has defenders who will not be cowed. When he finishes, silence presses heavy. Catiline, unable to bear the weight of accusation, leaps up in fury. He hurls back insults, calls Cicero a coward, a fraud, a man of no bloodline. But his words feel brittle, his defiance hollow. This Senate sees him not as a noble, but as a traitor. At last, Catiline storms from the chamber. The scrape of his sandals echoes against marble, each step a confession of guilt. Senators exhale in relief, yet also in dread. The conspiracy is not ended. It has merely moved into the open. That night the city buzzes with the news. Citizens crowd taverns to repeat Cicero's opening lines. Children mimic his gestures, repeating quo usque tandem like a chant. The Republic seems for the moment to breathe easier, but you can feel it. This is not resolution, it is escalation. The storm has only begun, and Cicero, consul at last, stands at its centre. The Temple of Jupiter Stator still rings with Cicero's words, but Catiline's fury has not cooled. He leaves the Senate in a storm of footsteps, cloak whipping, jaw tight with rage. Outside, his followers gather in alleys and taverns, whispering of fire and blades. Rome itself seems to shiver. You walk the streets in the evenings and hear rumours spread like smoke. Catiline's men plan to torch granaries, to assassinate senators, to strike terror until the Republic bends. Letters pass in secret, daggers pass in darker silence. No one knows when the blow will fall, only that it grows nearer each day. Inside his house, Cicero sharpens his defence not with steel but with ink. Scrolls cover his desk, witnesses and testimonies stacked high. He consults friends, sends spies, collects fragments of plots until the picture is clear. Rome teeters at the edge of civil war, and one speech will not be enough to save it. When the Senate gathers again, the air is thick with fear. Some senators glance toward the doors, half expecting assassins to burst through. Others look to Cicero, waiting for the voice that has become their shield, and once more he rises. His toga sways as he steps forward, voice steady, eyes sharp. This time he does not merely accuse Catiline. He names his co-conspirators. He describes the camps being raised outside the city, the weapons gathered, the messengers running by night. Gasps cut through the chamber. Cicero thunders that the Republic cannot be blackmailed by its own sons, that debt and desperation are no excuse for treason. He demands vigilance, courage, unity. The Senate listens, transfixed. Catiline is no longer a rumour, he is an enemy. Soon after, evidence arrives in Cicero's hands, letters seized from conspirators within the city. They outline plans to set Rome aflame, to butcher senators in their beds, to throw the Republic into chaos. Cicero carries the letters into the Senate like a general bearing trophies. He reads them aloud, each word a nail in the coffin of Catiline's cause. The chamber erupts. Senators cry for action. Citizens outside demand protection. Cicero orders arrests. Chains clatter as the conspirators are dragged into custody, their faces pale, their silence damning. But now comes the hardest choice. What to do with the prisoners? The Senate debates deep into the night. Some, including a young Julius Caesar, argue for imprisonment, for mercy tempered with caution. Others, led by Cato the Younger, demand death. No trial, no delay. Execution in defence of the Republic. You watch Cicero as he listens, his face unreadable. He knows the weight of either path. Mercy risks rebellion. Lenience risks more fire in the streets. But execution, the killing of Roman citizens without trial, will haunt him forever. At last he stands. His voice is firm, though shadows line his face. He declares that the Republic cannot gamble with survival. The conspirators must die. The Senate, trembling, agrees. That night the executions are carried out. 5 men led into the Tullianum prison, the chill of stone, the rope, the silence. When it is over, Cicero steps outside into the forum. The torches flare against the dark. Citizens wait, breathless. He raises his hand and speaks a single word, Vixerunt. They have lived. A roar of relief surges through the crowd. Rome has been saved. They hail Cicero as Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland. His name rises into the night like a hymn, and yet not all rejoice. Some mutter that he has overreached, that he has broken the sacred rights of citizens. The shadows of those executions will follow him. Even in triumph, Cicero has sown the seeds of future peril. You stand with the crowd as dawn touches the city. Rome has survived the conspiracy, but it has been scarred. And at its centre, Cicero stands both hero and target, praised and condemned. His consulship has made him immortal and vulnerable. The forum is quieter now. The conspiracy has been crushed, the fires averted, the daggers seized. Yet beneath the marble arches whispers move like smoke. Not praise, not gratitude, but questions. Did Cicero go too far? Roman citizens, executed without trial? What if tomorrow it is us? The very act that saved the Republic begins to shadow Cicero's name. His enemies find new strength, and among them rises a man skilled in stirring the mob, Publius Clodius Pulcher, tribune of the people. You walk the streets and see Clodius's supporters daub slogans on walls. You hear their jeers in the taverns. They demand vengeance for the conspirators slain. Cicero, once hailed Pater Patrius, is painted as a tyrant in toga. In 58 BC, Clodius pushes his law through the assembly. Any magistrate who ordered the execution of a Roman citizen without trial shall be banished. It is a dagger aimed straight at Cicero's heart. The city shifts. Allies grow hesitant. Friends turn cautious. Cicero pleads with senators, but fear silences them. The same Senate that once crowned him saviour now abandons him. At last he departs Rome. No triumphal procession this time, no cheers in the forum. He leaves at dawn, cloaked, quiet, his family weeping as the road carries him away. Behind him, Clodius's mob storms his house. The walls crack beneath hammer and fire. Marble and timber collapse into rubble. The home of Rome's greatest orator becomes ash. You follow him in your mind's eye across the seas, to Thessalonica, to Macedonia, to the coasts of Greece. There Cicero wanders like an exile from himself. He walks among the ruins of Athens, the stowers of philosophers he once studied, but now their words taste like dust. Letters flow back to Rome thick with grief. He writes of despair, of nights where sleep will not come, of mornings where the weight of disgrace presses too hard. The man who once stood unshaken before Catiline now bends beneath exile's sorrow. And yet in every port voices still murmur his name. Students of rhetoric, lovers of philosophy, provincial governors, they all know Cicero's words. His fame has outlived his office. It clings to him even in disgrace, like a torch that refuses to be quenched. Back in Rome, the tide begins to turn. The mobs grow restless under Clodius. Old allies rediscover courage. Pompey himself, once hesitant, steps forward to call for Cicero's return. By 57 BCE, the decree is passed. The exile may end. The orator may come home. When Cicero sets foot once more on Italian soil, the people surge to meet him. Crowds throng the roads, flowers scatter at his feet. The roar of welcome shakes the air. He has been gone a year, but the memory of his voice has not dimmed. Rome calls her defender back with tears and thunder. Yet for all the joy, something is missing. Cicero's house lies in ruins. His power is not what it was. The Republic itself feels less steady, its factions more bitter, its leaders more ruthless. You watch Cicero walk through the forum, head high but eyes shadowed. The return is triumphant, yes, but the exile has left scars. He has learned how quickly Rome can turn from cheers to stones, and that lesson will haunt every step he takes forward. Already, darker clouds gather. The shadow of Caesar, the ambitions of Pompey, the grinding gears of civil war. And Cicero, though restored, will soon find himself standing again in their path. The cheering of the crowd still rings in your ears. Rome has welcomed Cicero back with garlands and shouts, the streets trembling under the weight of celebration. Yet as the days pass, the echo fades. What remains is quieter, sharper, harder. The Senate sits again, but Cicero finds his seat less secure than before. Men who once rose to praise him now glance away, cautious of being tied too closely. The political winds have shifted. Pompey, Caesar, and Crassus form a triangle of power that no single orator can easily bend. You watch Cicero walk the forum. He is greeted warmly, yes, but the warmth is thinner. Merchants nod, citizens salute, but the awe of Father of the Fatherland no longer surrounds him. He is respected, yet not feared. At home, the ruins of his house still gape where Clodius's mobs tore it down. Stone cracked, timber burned, statues smashed. Rebuilding begins, but the rubble seems to echo a truth Cicero cannot ignore. Fame is fragile, honour perishable, even for Rome's greatest voice. In letters, he writes of his unease. He thanks Pompey for his role in restoring him, yet he knows it binds him. Gratitude becomes obligation. Obligation becomes silence at moments when once he would have thundered. The chains of exile remain, even in freedom. You sit near the steps of the Curia when debate rises over grain, over taxes, over alliances. Cicero speaks, his voice still strong, his words still elegant. But the Senate listens differently now. They nod politely, then look past him to Caesar's agents, to Pompey's allies, to the men who hold soldiers rather than syllables. Outside politics, Cicero turns increasingly to writing. Philosophy becomes his refuge. Scrolls pile up in his villa at Tusculum where the cypress trees sway in the breeze. There he shapes dialogues, reflections, translations of Greek thought into Latin words. His pen scratches late into the night, the sound of a man pouring his energy into something that cannot be voted away. Friends visit him in the countryside, they walk with him through the gardens, listen as he explains Stoic paradoxes, Epicurean balance, the duties of man to state and family. They see a man still restless, still proud, but gentler than the thunderous consul who once shouted Catiline into exile. Yet Rome does not allow distance for long. Crises mount. Grain shortages, rising debts, whispers of Caesar's ambition in Gaul. The Republic is shifting, sliding towards something unrecognizable, and even in retreat, Cicero feels the pull of duty, the call of the forum. Still, exile has marked him. He carries doubt now, as if every victory may vanish overnight, as if every friend might fail when most needed. It is the price of being cast out once. The memory never leaves. You sense in him both resolve and restraint. Resolve to defend the Republic with his voice, restraint not to risk another exile. It is a balance few men can keep. And already the shadow of Caesar grows longer, pressing against the city walls, pressing against Cicero's conscience. The Republic stirs uneasily, like a lion pacing in a cage. Soon its bars will snap, and Cicero will have to choose once more, to speak, to risk, to stand in the storm. The streets of Rome grow restless. Graffiti praising Caesar's victories in Gaul spreads across plaster walls. Merchants boast of new wealth from conquered provinces, and in the Senate whispers rise, not of laws or grain or debts, but of armies, Caesar's armies. You watch Cicero among them. He listens carefully, fingers pressed together, eyes narrowing when Caesar's name is spoken. He knows what it means. No general with such legions, such gold, such loyalty, has ever returned quietly to private life. Pompey too looms over every conversation. Once Caesar's ally, now his uneasy rival, he struts through the forum with soldiers at his side. Crassus is gone, killed in the east, leaving the balance broken. Rome is no longer a republic of senators. It is a stage for giants. Cicero stands apart from them, armed only with words, and yet words seem smaller now. He writes to friends of his dread, calling Caesar ambitious beyond restraint, Pompey uncertain, the Senate weak. His letters pulse with frustration. He knows the Republic is slipping, but his hands are bound by caution. One evening at his villa in Tusculum you find him pacing the colonnade. Cypress trees stand silent in the dusk, cicadas droning in the distance. A scroll lies open on the table, not of law or politics but philosophy. He has begun his Tusculan disputations, probing the nature of death, pain, virtue, and the soul. He leans over the parchment, pen scratching furiously. When politics fails him, philosophy steadies him. Here, no army interrupts, no mob shouts. Here, he shapes thought that will outlast even the ruins of Rome. Still, duty calls. News from Gaul speaks of Caesar crossing rivers, crushing tribes, piling triumph upon triumph. The Senate grows anxious, then paralyzed. Some call for limits on his command. Others dare not anger him. Cicero speaks, but his words hang in the air, heavy, unheeded. The senators nod, but glance toward the northern frontier, where real power marches in hobnailed boots. In private, Cicero confides that he fears both men, Caesar for his ambition, Pompey for his hesitation. He longs for a republic guided by law and reason, but instead sees two warlords circling. His voice once saved Rome from Catiline. Now it feels like a reed in a storm. And yet, even as shadows gather, his writings multiply. Dialogues on duty, on the gods, on the republic itself. Each work is a lifeline thrown into the future, a hope that if Rome falls, its spirit may survive on parchment. You sit beneath the trees as he pauses, eyes tired but steady. The light fades over the hills, and he whispers that philosophy is the one weapon tyranny cannot strip away. But already messengers ride up the road with new reports. Caesar has crossed another boundary. Pompey is rallying. Civil war edges closer. The shadow lengthens, and Cicero, caught between giants, cannot remain still for long. The tension snaps like a bowstring. Word spreads through the forum. Caesar has crossed the Rubicon. A single river, shallow and narrow, yet more dangerous than any battlefield. To cross it is to march on Rome itself. The Senate erupts in panic. Some senators flee at once, rushing for the roads to Campania and beyond. Others gather in fevered debate, voices rising, hands trembling. Whose side do they take? Caesar, the general of unmatched power, or Pompey, the man they once called Rome's greatest protector? You watch Cicero move through this chaos, his toga sweeping the marble steps. Every man stops him, asking, "Where do you stand?" His answer is measured, cautious. He trusts neither. Pompey commands loyalty, yes, but hesitates too often. Caesar burns with brilliance, but ambition devours him. At home, letters fly from Cicero's hand. To Atticus, to friends scattered across Italy, he confesses his torment. If he supports Caesar, he betrays the Republic. If he supports Pompey, he risks disaster should Pompey falter. And if he remains silent, he becomes irrelevant, his voice lost in the roar of war. When Pompey finally rallies forces in the south, Cicero hesitates no longer. Reluctantly, grimly, he travels to join him. Not out of love for Pompey, but out of loyalty to the Republic he once defended with oratory. The Republic may be fragile, even dying, but he cannot hand it willingly to Caesar. You see him in Pompey's camp. Soldiers tramp mud underfoot, shields glint in the fading sun. Cicero looks out of place among the armour and spears. His weapon is voice, not sword. Yet he moves from tent to tent, speaking to commanders, reminding them of duty, of law, of Rome's ancient dignity. But the war is swift. At Pharsalus in Greece, Pompey's legions collapse under Caesar's disciplined command. The Senate's cause crumbles in dust and blood. Cicero stands on the hillside watching lines of men break, shields scatter, horses trample the field. The republic he chose is defeated in a single day. He flees as so many others flee, but unlike others, he is spared the sword. Caesar, now master of Rome, offers him pardon. The conqueror extends mercy, a gesture both gracious and humiliating. Cicero bows his head, torn between gratitude and shame. Back in Rome, he returns not to triumph but to survival. The city hums with Caesar's presence. Statues raised, decrees issued, senators silent. Cicero walks the forum knowing he is tolerated, not needed. Once he was the defender of the state. Now he is a relic permitted to live. Yet in that silence he turns again to writing. Scroll after scroll pours from his villa, works on law, on duty, on the nature of the gods. If Rome's freedom is gone, perhaps its wisdom can be preserved. If he cannot shape the republic with speeches, he will shape the centuries with words. You watch him beneath the cypress at Tusculum, ink staining his fingers, the lamplight flickering on his face. He sighs often, shoulders heavy, but he writes on, for in the clash of Pompey and Caesar, he has seen the republic fall, and though he still lives, he knows the Rome he loved has died. The forum is restless once more. Caesar's statues gleam in the sun, crowned with laurel wreaths draped in royal robes. At their base murmurs stir. Is he king? The word tastes sour in Roman mouths, for Rome was born from the exile of kings, and yet here stands a man who commands as though monarchy has returned. You see Cicero among the senators, his face drawn with unease. He accepts Caesar's pardon, yes, but never his tyranny. In letters to friends, he calls Caesar a threat cloaked in clemency, a master, not a leader. He writes of liberty as though writing an epitaph. The city divides. Some bow willingly, lured by patronage and protection. Others grit their teeth, whispering of daggers in the dark. The old republic gasps, but still it breathes in secret corners. Then comes March. The air sharp with spring, the Senate summoned to meet in Pompey's theatre. Caesar arrives in his scarlet cloak, the crowd parting like water before him. Trumpets blare, soldiers hover, but within the chamber no blades are seen, only togas. You hover at the edge of that chamber watching. Senators crowd close, faces tense, voices low. Caesar takes his seat, adjusting his robes, and suddenly steel flashes. One thrust, then another. Senators who once praised him now cut him down, their hands red with resolve. The chamber explodes in chaos. Shouts echo, sandals scrape marble. Caesar collapses beneath a rain of wounds. Blood pools at the base of Pompey's statue, a bitter offering at the feet of Rome's past protector. The dictator falls, whispering words lost to the din. News tears through the city like fire in dry grass. Some cheer in the streets, crying, "Liberty!" Others wail in fear, rushing to bar their doors, knowing revenge will follow. Cicero stands apart, silent. He has not raised a dagger, yet the sight rekindles hope within him. Perhaps the Republic may yet breathe again. He writes quickly to friends. Our tyrant deserved his death. Rome has been delivered, but beneath his words lies caution. Already the assassins, Brutus, Cassius, their fellow, scramble to justify themselves. Already Antony maneuvers, seizing Caesar's papers, Caesar's soldiers, Caesar's place in the people's hearts. The Republic is not restored. It is trembling on a knife's edge. You walk the forum at dusk. The rostra stands empty, the air thick with rumour. Some swear Rome will return to the Senate. Others whisper that Caesar's heir, the young Octavian, is arriving from the provinces. One tyrant has fallen, but the future feels no lighter. In his villa, Cicero sits late into the night, scrolls and lamps scattered before him. Hope flickers in his chest, but unease grows alongside it. He knows the Republic's survival depends not only on daggers, but on voices. And once more his voice will have to rise, even if it places him in mortal danger. The days after Caesar's death do not bring clarity. They bring smoke and confusion. In the forum, crowds gather, uncertain whether to cheer for freedom or mourn for their fallen leader. The assassins walk stiffly, claiming the mantle of liberators, but the people's eyes are clouded with doubt. Into this chaos steps Mark Antony, consul, ally, survivor. He moves with the confidence of a man who knows the moment belongs to him. At Caesar's funeral, he lifts the bloodied cloak high before the people. The wounds gape like mouths still crying out. Gasps turn to sobs, sobs turn to fury. You watch as Antony's voice rises, shaking with passion. He names each stab, each traitor's hand. The people who only days before muttered of tyranny now roar against Caesar's killers. Torches flash, stones fly, houses burn. Rome, once again, is a city at war with itself. In the Senate, Antony wastes no time. He seizes Caesar's papers, Caesar's treasures, Caesar's soldiers. He presents himself not as tyrant, but as steward of Caesar's will, protector of the people's inheritance. It is a clever mask and one few dare to tear away. Cicero watches with clenched jaw. This is not the Republic reborn. It is tyranny draped in mourning robes. He writes bitterly to his friends. Antony is drunk on power, unrestrained, dangerous. He sees in Antony not the restraint of law, but the hunger of a man who will stop at nothing. But resistance is perilous. Antony commands legions. He commands the mob. He commands fear. Cicero, armed only with words, must decide if he dares to speak them. At his villa, he debates with himself, walks the gardens, scroll in hand, lips moving silently as he rehearses. Every argument sharpens like a blade, but every blade may cut him as deeply as his target. Still, silence is worse. To say nothing is to surrender the Republic entirely. By summer, the Senate bends under Antony's pressure. Decrees pass that expand his power, excuses made for his abuses. Cicero paces, frustrated. He sees men once proud shrink into compromise, trading liberty for survival. It is Catiline's danger all over again, not in shadows this time, but in the open, smiling from the consul's chair. In private conversation, Cicero begins to speak more boldly. He names Antony a threat, a would-be tyrant in Caesar's shadow. Friends warn him to be cautious, but Cicero knows himself. Caution has never been his cloak for long. His weapon has always been voice, and soon voice must become thunder again. One evening, as torches burn low, Cicero dips his pen into ink and begins a new speech. He titles it, not for the Senate, not for Rome, but for Antony. The first of many. They will call them the Philippics, and in them Cicero will hurl every ounce of wit, every blade of rhetoric, every thunderclap of reason against the man he believes threatens the Republic's last breath. The curia is hushed when Cicero enters. His toga, white and bordered with purple, rustles softly as he takes his place. All eyes shift toward him, the man who once silenced Catiline, the man who dared call treason by its name. For months he has spoken cautiously, but now his silence ends. Mark Antony sits at the front, broad-shouldered, heavy with command. His eyes flicker with impatience. He knows Cicero too well. Words from this man can wound more deeply than swords. Cicero rises, the chamber waits, and then the voice returns, steady, sharp, honed like iron. He praises the Senate's authority, the traditions of Rome, the duty of magistrates. Every phrase begins as if in Antony's favour, but each one coils, tightens, and then snaps. It is not praise at all, it is warning. You can feel the rhythm build. He recalls Caesar's ambition, cloaked in kindness. He warns of Antony's growing control over Caesar's papers and decrees. He questions Antony's loyalty, his excess, his hunger for power. Each sentence lands like a stone dropped into a still pool. Ripples spread across the Senate floor. Antony shifts in his seat, jaw tight. Senators glance nervously, but none interrupt. The memory of Cicero's old triumph still lingers. This is the voice that once drove Catiline from the chamber. This is the voice that named conspirators and saved Rome. When Cicero pauses, you hear the scrape of sandals, the flutter of togas, the soft intake of breath. The chamber feels alive again, as though the Republic itself has spoken. It is not the roar of armies, but it is defiance. And for a moment Rome remembers its laws, its dignity, its courage. He ends not with thunder, but with a measured plea. That Antony must temper ambition with restraint, that the Senate must guard its authority, that liberty must not vanish in the shadow of a single man. The words hang like incense in the air. The senators rise slowly, murmuring shaken. Some whisper that Cicero has gone too far. Others feel their hearts stir, remembering what it is to stand for the Republic. But Antony's face is dark as stone. His silence is not weakness, it is promise. When Cicero leaves the chamber, the streets buzz. Copies of his speech spread quickly, carried in wax tablets, memorized and repeated in taverns and courtyards. The people nod, murmur approval, feel courage kindling in their chests. The orator has spoken, and Rome listens. Yet you can sense the danger. Cicero has done more than speak. He has drawn a line. And Antony, a man of soldiers and vengeance, is not one to let such lines stand unchallenged. The First Philippic is not merely a speech. It is the opening volley in a war of words that will soon become a war of survival. The ink hardly dries on the First Philippic before Cicero sharpens his pen again. The speech has stirred the Senate, but Antony remains in power, his grip tightening. So Cicero does what he has always done. He returns to the rostra, the marble platform in the forum, and lets words fly like arrows. This time there is no veil of courtesy. The Second Philippic is venom wrapped in rhetoric. He does not address the Senate formally. He addresses Antony directly, as though the man were standing before him, forced to endure every lash. You hear the accusation spill forth. Antony is called drunk, corrupt, a thief of Caesar's treasures. Cicero mocks his appetites, his debts, his scandals. Every sin is dragged into daylight. It is no longer politics. It is character assassination performed with surgical skill. The streets buzz with the words. Copies of the Philippics spread like wildfire, recited in marketplaces, muttered in bathhouses. Rome begins to laugh at Antony, and nothing enrages a man of power more than mockery. In the Senate, Cicero follows with more speeches, each sharper than the last. 14 in total, each modelled after Demosthenes' denunciations of Philip of Macedon. He invokes history itself, casting Antony not as consul, but as tyrant in waiting. He urges the senators to act, to reclaim courage, to refuse to kneel. Some cheer him quietly, moved by the return of his fire. Others shrink back, fearing Antony's retribution, but no one can ignore him. The Philippics become the talk of Rome, each speech a drumbeat of defiance. And Antony, seething, does not forget a word. He snarls that Cicero has signed his own death warrant. He tells allies that the orator's tongue has wounded him more deeply than daggers ever could. Cicero, he vows, will pay. Still, Cicero writes on. In his villa, scrolls pile high, lamps burn deep into the night. His hand aches, his eyes tire, but the voice within him refuses silence. He believes that as long as words can be spoken, Rome still has hope. But you can feel the air thicken with menace. Antony grows stronger by the day, gathering allies, bending soldiers to his will. And though Cicero's words stir hearts, they cannot raise legions. The imbalance widens. As you watch Cicero step down from the rostra after yet another fiery Philippic, a chill runs through the forum. The applause of citizens cannot drown out the footsteps of soldiers in the distance. The war of words has reached its peak. The next battle will not be fought with speeches. It will be fought with steel. Winter grips the Italian coast when the summons comes. The second triumvirate is formed. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus sealing their pact with blood and vengeance. They draft their lists of enemies, and at the top, written in bold strokes, is one name, Marcus Tullius Cicero. You see him in his villa at Formiae, the sea air sharp, the cypress trees bending under cold winds. Friends urge him to flee, to sail at once, to vanish before Antony's soldiers arrive. His household trembles, slaves whispering, family pressing him with tears. The road south toward Brundisium is open. From there, a ship could carry him far away. At dawn, the litter is prepared. Strong arms lift him, cloaked and hooded, carried swiftly along the road. The sound of waves echoes nearby, mingling with the creak of wheels and the thud of sandals. Every mile carries him farther from the forum, farther from the city where his voice once thundered. But as they travel, Cicero grows silent. He looks out from the curtains of the litter at the trees, the villas, the familiar hills of Latium. His face hardens. He has lived 6 decades, spoken more words than any man in Rome, defended the Republic with every breath. Should he spend his last days as a fugitive? Midway along the road, he orders the bearers to stop. His attendants protest, but his hand rises firm. He will not run any farther, not from Antony, not from fate. They turn back slowly toward the villa. News of soldiers spreads quickly, dust rising on the horizon. The clatter of weapons draws nearer. There is no more time. Cicero sits in the atrium as the day wanes, his cloak wrapped close, his hair stirred by the sea breeze. He does not hide. He waits calm, as if preparing to address the Senate once more. And when Antony's men arrive, swords drawn, Cicero lifts his chin. "I go no farther," he says, voice steady. "Approach, soldier. If you can do at least this much properly, sever this neck." The house falls silent. Even the soldiers hesitate, for before them sits not merely a man, but the memory of Rome's voice. Yet duty or vengeance drives them on. The final act begins. The villa at Formiae falls still as Antony's soldiers step forward. Their armour clinks, their sandals scrape across the mosaic floor. Cicero does not rise. He remains seated, cloak drawn close, gaze steady. It is not defiance, not submission, but acceptance. The leader of the band hesitates. This is not some nameless rebel. This is Cicero, the man whose words shook Rome, who once silenced Catiline, who stood for the Republic when others faltered. To kill him is to silence more than a man. It is to strike at Rome's very conscience. But Antony's orders are clear. No pardon, no mercy. Cicero has mocked him, exposed him, scarred him with words sharper than daggers. For Antony, this execution is not justice. It is vengeance. Cicero lowers his head slightly, baring his neck. His voice, calm and unwavering, carries through the atrium. There is nothing proper about what you are about to do, soldier, but if you must, do it well. The sword rises, a single stroke, swift and brutal. The orator's head falls, and with it, an age of words. The hands that once gestured with thunder in the Senate are severed as well, hacked away in cruel spite. The villa echoes with weeping, the wails of servants and family, but the soldiers, grim-faced, carry their prize back toward Rome, a grisly burden wrapped in cloth, the head and hands of Cicero, once the Republic's brightest flame. In the Forum, Antony's orders are fulfilled. The rostra, the very platform where Cicero had hurled his most powerful speeches, becomes his final stage. There, before the gathered crowd, his severed head is mounted high. His hands, those instruments of rhetoric, nailed beside it. The people stare in horror. Some weep openly, others avert their gaze. Even those who despise Cicero shudder at the sight. This silencing of a man not by argument, but by mutilation. Fulvia, Antony's wife, approaches. Her eyes blaze with fury and triumph. She takes pins from her hair, sharp and gleaming, and pierces Cicero's tongue again and again. The tongue that had called her husband a drunkard, a criminal, a tyrant. Her vengeance is personal, savage, final. Yet even in this grotesque display, Cicero's power lingers. The people murmur his words beneath their breath. They remember Catiline's conspiracy, the trials, the orations that once steadied the Republic. The body is gone, the tongue pierced, but the voice endures in memory, in parchment, in hearts. As night falls over Rome, torches flicker on the Forum stones. The shadow of Cicero's head stretches across the rostra, mingling with the ghosts of senators past. The Republic is broken, but its defender has become immortal in death. The Forum quiets after the horror. The torches burn low, the crowd disperses, and Cicero's severed head still rests on the rostra, silent where once his voice commanded. But even as Rome recoils, his words refuse to vanish. They cling to parchment, to memory, to the hearts of those who once heard him thunder against corruption. Time carries forward, the triumvirate rules, Antony wages wars, Octavian maneuvers toward empire. The Republic Cicero fought to defend dissolves into dust, yet in the libraries, in the villas of scholars, in the minds of students, his speeches remain. Scrolls are copied and recopied, passed from hand to hand, surviving fire and time. Generations later, when the Renaissance blooms in Florence, his voice stirs again. Humanists pore over his writings, enthralled by the elegance of his Latin, the clarity of his thought. To them, Cicero is not a relic, but a guide, a man who proved that words can be sharper than steel. Petrarch, Salutati, Bruni, All drink from his well, shaping their vision of civic virtue on the bones of his republic. The Enlightenment follows. In Paris salons and English parlours, Cicero's treatises on duty, law and liberty are read aloud. Philosophers find in him a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern reason. Montesquieu cites him, Locke studies him. To speak of natural law, of rights, of duties, is to echo Cicero across the centuries. Across the ocean, in a fledgling America, his influence deepened still. The founding fathers, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, read his words by candlelight. In Cicero's reflections, they find justification for resistance to tyranny, for government bound by the welfare of its people. When Jefferson declares that the care of human life and happiness is the first and only legitimate object of good government, Cicero's spirit whispers in the ink. And yet, beyond philosophy, beyond law, he is remembered as a man. A father who wept for his daughter, a friend who wrote letters filled with wit and vulnerability, a citizen who faltered and feared but still rose to speak. That humanity is what makes his legacy endure, not perfection, but persistence. Walk now among the ruins of the Forum. The stones are cracked, the temples toppled, the rostra weathered by centuries of rain. But if you pause, if you let silence fill your ears, you can almost hear it. A voice rising against corruption, a warning to Catiline, a plea for the Republic. Cicero speaks still, not in flesh, but in echo. Centuries pass, and still the echo lingers. Cicero's head no longer sits on the rostra, his hands no longer nailed in warning. Rome itself has crumbled, its marble worn to dust, its senate fallen silent. Yet in quiet libraries his voice breathes again. A monk in a candlelit scriptorium bends over parchment, copying his words by hand. Outside, snow gathers on stone cloisters, but inside Cicero lives, his Latin strokes shaping thought for another age. A scholar in Florence opens a trunk of ancient manuscripts and gasps at Cicero's letters. He feels as though he has found not words, but a companion. Through the ink, Cicero speaks across 1,000 years, as fresh as if yesterday's Senate still rang with his orations. A statesman in Philadelphia pores over Defiance, weighing its lessons on duty. The flicker of lamplight catches his tired eyes as he drafts a constitution for a new republic. The voice of Cicero, long silenced by Antony's sword, steadies his pen. And now, you walk alone through ruins at dusk. The Forum is quiet, shadows stretching across the broken columns. A breeze stirs, carrying faint whispers. It feels as though Cicero still walks beside you, pointing to the stones, reminding you of the law, of liberty, of the welfare of the people. Sleep drifts closer. The stones blur, the torches of Rome fade, and the voice becomes softer, less urgent, more like a lullaby. Not a consul's thunder, not a senator's warning, but a gentle reassurance that words matter, that courage matters, that even when the Republic falls, the spirit of freedom may yet endure. You close your eyes, the marble cools beneath your hand, and somewhere, far beyond time, Cicero's voice lingers, not in fear, not in grief, but in calm. The Republic sleeps, but the echo continues, and you drift with it into quiet, into stillness, into rest. The night clerk of the Basilica. They said justice in Rome moved on sandaled feet, soft, measured, never hurried. By dusk the Forum cools under a lavender sky. Shadows lengthen along the marble. Oil lamps twitch to life like small constellations fallen to earth. You slip through the colonnade of the Basilica Aemilia. Your steps are careful on worn stone. Wax tablets clack softly inside your satchel. You are not an advocate, not a senator, not a praetor with lictors clearing a path. You are a clerk, a keeper of names and minutes and modest truths. Inside, the basilica breathes like a sleeping beast. Tall columns fade upward into dimness. The tribunal platform waits like a ship's deck above a quiet sea. You touch the edge of the judge's bench. It is cool, smooth with the polish of 1,000 arguments. Scribes murmur over lists. A beadle trims a lamp's wick with a bronze pick. The flame steadies, warm as bread. Cases have spilled all day like grain from a torn sack. Contracts disputed, dowries contested, boundaries quarrelled over with gestures sharp as knives. Night is yours. The long work begins when voices have gone home to stew and soften, when parchment cools, when the forum exhales. You spread your tools across a cedar table. Stylus, sponged string, a small knife to score wax when lines go crooked. Beyond the pillars, Rome murmurs like surf. A mule bell, a distant laugh, the click of dice in a tavern under the portico. You open the first docket. A freedman claims an inheritance promised by a kinder voice than law. A nephew objects, armed with cousins and cold eyes. You copy names into neat rows. Gaius, Marcus, Livia, who brought olives and silence to every hearing. The judge has marked the margin with a tiny fish, his private sign for settle if possible. You smile. Even power prefers peace when it can be written. You breathe. You let the basilica's hush become a kind of cloak. Ink steadies, wax cools. A junior advocate lingers near the steps. He's young enough to glow with zeal. He asks if you have ever seen truth arrive like a chariot. You say truth usually arrives like a pedestrian, on time if everyone lets it. He laughs too loudly for the hour, catches himself, bows, leaves with his scrolls tucked like sleeping birds under his arm. You file the property survey from a farm near Tibur, a boundary marked by an old elm and a stubborn stream. The elm has died, the stream has wandered. Men argue, but water does what water does. A lictor passes, shadow long as a spear. His bundle of rods and axe glints once, then dulls. Authority drifting through lamplight like a thought. You warm your hands over a brazier. The charcoal smells faintly of pine resin and yesterday's arguments. Heat gathers your fingers back to service. From the far end, the archivist waves. Her hair is pinned with a bronze needle shaped like a dolphin. She mouths the word testamenta and holds up a string-tied packet. You take the wills one by one. They whisper the same poem in different hands. What I loved, what I feared, who I hoped would remember me gently. Cicero's name crosses your mind and passes on. His speeches travel like comets through the city. But most law moves like groundwater, unseen, patient, necessary. A cat wedges itself between your ankles. Temple-born, basilica-fed, more god than animal. It blinks as if blessing your docket. You accept the benediction. You turn to a petition from a potter. His kiln cracked. His neighbour swears the smoke cursed the vines. Both men smell of failure and ash. The praetor's note is crisp. Smoke is not a curse. Compensate the vines for soot. Fix the kiln with a mason, not with a prayer. Your stylus taps twice on the tablet. The sound is a small metronome against Rome's long heart. Tick, tick, justice, but kindly. Wind slips along the nave. The lamps tremble like eyelids at the edge of sleep. You anchor the flame with a twist of the wick. From the dark outside, a flute breathes a slow tune. Someone wooing, or practicing, or remembering. It threads the columns like silk. You unroll a deposition. A woman from the Zubura speaks in tight sentences. She counted coins, she kept ledgers. She was not believed until the numbers were copied in your hand. You write her totals carefully. Each sum is a stair she climbs out of doubt. At the bottom, she will not be alone. Your lamp gutters, you feed it oil from a narrow-necked jug. The flame recovers with a small, grateful sound. A beadle brings you bread and olives. He sets them down with the reverence of an acolyte. Eat, he says. Words need salt. You do. The olive's brine wakes the tongue. The crust breaks like good news. You return to the page softer, steadier. A magistrate crosses the floor in felted shoes. Even his caution makes a sound. He asks without asking whether the dockets will be ready by dawn. You nod without nodding. They will. You close one case with a ribbon of red thread, another with twine. Some disputes want silk, most prefer string. A draft lifts the edge of a map. You palm it flat. Lines of road and river hold still like a tamed thought. Across the aisle, two scribes debate a comma the way soldiers debate a hill. One wants the breath short, one wants it generous. You smile. Mercy lives in pauses. From the court doors, a late knock, gentle, twice only. You glance to the beadle. He shrugs and opens. A man enters carrying a basket wrapped in linen. Inside, small clay lamps with fresh wicks. His daughter made them, he says. He asks if the Basilica will buy 4. The price is modest as bread. You trade coins from the petty cash. The beadle stamps a receipt with a copper bore. The man bows, surprised to be seen. He will tell his daughter that her light burns in the court of Rome. You set one of the new lamps near the archive door. Its glow is patient, pleased with its work. In the corner, a statue of Concord watches, hands joined with an invisible other. You feel the Basilica's design beneath your feet, long, steady, meant for gathering and sorting and mending. A gust lifts the curtain by the east apse. For an instant the moon appears, thin as a seal on a letter. You copy the praetor's morning schedule onto a fresh tablet. Petitions first, depositions next, sentences reserved for cases where anger has cooled. Cool is kinder than hot. You have learned that from papyrus and people. The archivist returns with a smile that lives mostly in her eyes. Found your missing census list, she whispers. She taps a roll tied with faded blue, filed under hope. You laugh, which sounds like a yawn that remembered to be cheerful. You log the figures. The numbers align like soldiers who decided to stand at ease. Somewhere beyond the Basilica, water pours from a fountain spout. Bronze lion, stone basin, the drip counts the night in a tongue older than law. Your eyes wander to the tribunal again. You picture the day's quarrels sitting down like tired dogs, even anger naps, given a warm floor. You open a small wooden box of seals, boar for property, cornucopia for market, scales for debt. Each press leaves a little promise in wax. You seal the freedman's settlement with the scales. You sign beside it with your modest clerk's hand. Nothing grand, but legible, and sometimes legible is mercy. Your back stiffens and then forgives you. You stretch, arms sweeping a quiet arc. The lamp rings your fingertips in gold. A passing patrol pauses at the doorway. Leather creaks. A spear butt ticks the stone twice. One soldier nods to you as if you were a priest. You nod back as if he were a librarian. You return to the docket. A baker and a miller share a grievance, each wrapped in flour like first snow. The judge wrote, "Share the fault, share the cost, share a loaf when the case is done." You underline the last line twice. Wind tastes of rain. Somewhere a storm is arguing with the shore. Rome listens to no one, but it hears everything. You stack completed tablets into a shallow chest. They make a satisfying sound, like a choir taking its seats. In the quiet, philosophy sidles up like a friendly cat. What is justice? A tool, a path, a habit practiced until it becomes a second spine. You think of the woman with the totals, of the potter with the cracked kiln, of the farmers and vines learning to forgive smoke and season. You think of how law is a net woven from very small knots. Your hands tie some of them. The pattern holds. People sleep. The archivist dozes with her dolphin pin like a tiny oar in a dream. Her breath keeps time with the lion's fountain. You lay a folded cloth over her shoulders. A shutter taps. You wedge it with a scrap of cedar. The smell is ship and forest and the inside of a chest where a mother keeps letters. You dip the stylus. You write one more note to tomorrow. Begin with kindness if possible. If not possible, pause. If still not possible, speak plain and brief. Another lamp lowers itself towards sleep. You pinch the wick's ember with wetted fingers. Dark gently reclaims its corner. Your satchel is lighter now. The Basilica agrees. Its stones loosen their shoulders. The night stretches like a cat that has forgiven everyone. You step outside for a breath. The forum is a bowl of quiet silver. The stars are audience and actors both. On the steps, a boy naps against a bundle of cloth. Messenger, by the dust on his sandals. You cover him with your spare cloak. He does not wake. You return to your table and close the chest. The latch falls home with a tender click. Work has become rest that someone else can use. At the tribunal, you place tomorrow's docket under a weight shaped like a sleeping dog. The dog has guarded this bench longer than generals have guarded provinces. It never barks. It simply keeps. 2 lamps remain, one for you, one for the door. They speak to each other in small flames. You sit. You let the Basilica finish the story it began at dawn. People came worried. They left less worried. Not because everything was solved, but because someone wrote it down. The night clerk writes the city to sleep. That is the craft. That is the temple. You close your eyes and listen to the measured breath of Rome. It is the sound of ledgers closing, of sandals waiting on the threshold, of laws laying their heads down beside mercy. When morning finds you, it will knock softly, like that man with the basket of lamps, like truth arriving on foot, right on time if everyone lets it. The first sparrows begin to rehearse the light. The archivist stirs under her cloth. The patrol changes at the door. You rise with the Basilica and set the day in order, and as the sun fingers the columns with gold, the night's work becomes a quiet road behind you. The lamps bow out. The cat chooses another ankle. Voices return. You put your palm for a moment on the judge's bench. It is warm now, as if all the small mercies you filed have learned to glow. You smile because it is true. Justice in Rome moves on sandaled feet. Soft, measured, never hurried, and tonight it slept well.